Good evening, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Kinna McPherson. I was the science editor of the Newark Star Ledger for many years, and I am now a proud member of the faculty of St. Benedict's, where I teach journalism and writing. I don't know whether it's been because we all have been cooped up for so long, but I have to tell you, there's been quite a lot of writing flowing from our students recently. Certainly, some of them have been at it for some time, through the Benedict News, our student newspaper, the Drama Guild, which produced two plays with much student writing this year, one which was shown and the other closed before it could open due to the pandemic, and the Kayrix, our literary magazine. But I think we can attribute much of the present flowering of creativity to an idea conceived by our assistant headmaster, Michelle Tordo, who said in mid-March, shortly before the school moved to remote learning, "Why doesn't the Benedict News create a student blog cataloging life during the pandemic?" A student writer came up with a name, Going Viral, and we were off. Tonight, we celebrate some of our top seniors and applaud their talent in writing. But first, I want to make sure we say some thank yous. Thank you to Ms. Tordo for her support of the Writing Center and this event. Thank you to Dexter Lupina, the head of technology here, who has put in so much time behind the scenes to make this broadcast. Thank you to Justin Ross, the chair of the English department, who joins us tonight and supports a culture of creativity. Thank you to my dear colleague, Elizabeth Lodato, whose hard work made this event possible, and to other faculty who work with us at the Writing Center, Brother Mark Delone and Miss Danielle Lauby, whose book club is quite a hit. A remarkable writer, Andre Dubusse III, has said this: "I think the deeper you go into questions, the deeper or more interesting questions get." And I think that's the job of art. We will certainly be hearing from some budding artists tonight. And now I'd like to turn the program over to Mr. Justin Ross.
Thank you, Mrs. McPherson. Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here to celebrate the writing talents of this outstanding group of young men. As these young Benedict writers embark on the next phase of their lives, I am thankful we have the opportunity tonight to reflect on the impressive body of work they are leaving behind to the students who come after them. St. Benedict's is built on tradition and legacy, and we have a long-standing tradition of developing the craft of writing, from classes like Newark Studies in the early 2000s, which required students to report on local neighborhood issues, to award-winning publications like the Benedict News, our school newspaper, and Kayrix, our literary magazine. Student writing has always been cultivated by these unique platforms, which span across a variety of exciting literary genres. In keeping with the theme of tradition, the Hudson Review, a top New York literary magazine, has maintained a close relationship with us for nearly 20 years through a program called Writers in the Schools. Their mission is to bring to students the excitement of meeting and relating to professional writers by inviting them into the classroom. On a recent visit, the longtime editor, Paula Dietz, said, "St. Benedict's is one of our star schools, and students are always well-prepared and engaged." She added that the program's success depends on the enthusiastic collaboration with teachers and students. I think tonight is a great example of that very collaboration she was talking about. Though in this instance, we as teachers are the eager audience and our very own students are the stars. So as an English teacher and representative of the department, I want to extend a huge thank you to Mrs. McPherson and Mrs. Lodato and Mr. Lupina and all of the student writers on tonight's panel for sharing your talents and putting this special event together.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. We're going to get started with questions, and for this, I'm going to turn the evening over to Miss Elizabeth Lodato. Miss Lodato teaches English at SBP. She is also trained as a Shakespearean actor and recently portrayed Touchstone in a virtual performance of As You Like It. Miss Lodato.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. Good evening. It is my pleasure to introduce tonight's panel. I'm going to tell you a bit about each speaker this evening, and I'm going to go in alphabetical order. First up, we have Angel. Angel is an actor with the St. Benedict's Drama Guild, and while he has never formally put his writing out to the community, he loves to write. He's planning to do his first few years of college at Passaic County Community College and then going on for a major in secondary education with a concentration in English. Ari is a senior, a two-time national soccer champion, and a member of the Benedict News. He enjoys reading philosophy, history, psychology, and sometimes politics while writing mainly about philosophy and present-day events. He hopes one day to pursue a professional career as a soccer player while obtaining a degree in philosophy and another subject of his choice. Kevin C. is the editor-in-chief of the Benedict News, the vice president of service for the National Honor Society, and a leader of the White Section. While he likes writing, he considers himself more of a numbers person. However, he knows that being able to write will take him far in life and will help in his future endeavors. In the words of Father Albert, writing, thinking, and speaking are all part of the same action. He will be attending NJIT and pursuing a dual degree in accounting and business administration. Jonathan is the editor-in-chief of the Benedict News, assistant group leader of Father Timothy Dwyer, and the secretary of the National Honor Society. He has been a part of the Benedict News since sophomore year and has covered stories such as the 2017 solar eclipse and the 2018 snowstorm. He will be attending Rutgers Newark. Kevin J. is from Newark, New Jersey, and will be attending St. Vincent College in the fall. He will major in philosophy and is currently undecided on a second major. He enjoys reading African American literature and reading and writing poetry. He also writes for the Benedict News. Ruben is a senior, a varsity wrestler, academic dean of the Leahy House, staff writer for the Benedict News, and a member of St. Benedict's National Honor Society. When he's not tutoring or in season, Ruben is an avid writer and reader. He aspires one day to write a novel and hopes to be published by The Atlantic before he graduates high school. And finally, David is from West Orange, New Jersey. He is the editor-in-chief of the Kayrix, St. Benedict Prep's literary magazine. Next year, he will be attending St. Vincent College in Pennsylvania to play soccer and pursue a degree in secondary education with a concentration in English. So welcome to all of our panel. It's a pleasure to have all of you here tonight. Over the past year, you as a group have covered a wide range of issues, from topics as weighty as racial prejudice and immigration to community-centered stories about virtual convo and social distancing. But before we get into your lives as writers today, I would like to ask, what sparked your interest in writing? And I'm going to begin with Angel.
Hi. Well, it mostly started with my grandfather. My grandfather got me into reading because he used to tell me all these stories, and I liked them. And he would hand me a book and say, "Look, you like stories? Here's this." And I would read and read and read. And then one day, it was kind of like he didn't see the reading was enough, because he just saw me reading but not doing anything else. So he's like, "There's more to it." And I'm like, "What do you mean there's more to it? There's just reading." And so he hands me a pen and paper and says, write something. And I didn't know what to write. I was just a kid. And that's how it started. Every day he'd sit down with me, a pen and paper. He'd say, write something. I would write non-coherent sentences, that a little kid would write. And I slowly but surely, I grew to love that, because it was just, I could be in those stories that I had been told so much. And yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Angel. Up next, we're going to hear from Ari.
Hello. I think my my interest in writing had to start from my interest in reading. And I couldn't speak until I was 4 years old. So instead of talking, I would read. And this especially came from my grandmother always reading to me. She would read childish books such as Bluefish or books by Dr. Seuss. My interest in in writing didn't come until about high school. For middle school and elementary, I'd only read. It wasn't until I arrived in Mr. Petrick, Mr. Ross, and Miss Elias and Mr. Delaney's classes that I actually started to be interested in writing. And that's how it started.
Thank you so much, Ari. All right, next we're going to hear from Kevin C.
All right, so similarly to what Ari said, my love of writing began with my love of reading, and initially that wasn't the case. Like in elementary school, I didn't really like writing. I thought it was too much work. That's why I preferred math. But then I went to Benedict's. Had some of the best English teachers out there, and they all inspired me to write. Especially Mr. Petrick, who didn't really force us to write on a certain subject, but he let us write down our what happens day to day, or something that interests us. And I feel like that's the most important kind of writing, to write what's important to you. And well, anyways, fast forward, and I couldn't get into the gym class because it was full, and there was other options of classes. It was African American history or intro to journalism. And, I was very fortunate to be in Miss McPherson's intro to journalism class. And I was a good tech guy, so I offered to be the online editor for the Benedict News. And, the rest is history. Now I'm the editor-in-chief. And what I like about news writing is that you're always straightforward. You got to get to the point, and I guess that matches my personality per se. And that's it.
All right, thank you so much, Kevin. Next, we're going to hear from Jonathan.
I began writing in school. I never really liked writing that much. I didn't enjoy it, but I always did what I had to do when I was in school, and all my teachers told me that I was good at writing. So I didn't really have a hobby of writing, but I would write every now and then, just to kind of go about how I would write about how my day was. You could say it was a diary. I wouldn't call it that, but I would just write about how my day was. I'd write about how I felt, and I would just continue doing that. And when I came to St. Benedict's, I also landed upon the journalism class, and Ms. McPherson told me I was a pretty good writer. I started in the Benedict News in photography, but because Ms. McPherson told me I should write, I started to move into writing more, and it eventually landed me here as the editor-in-chief of the Benedict News. So I think over time, my love of writing grew, and I became a better writer over time because all of my teachers would push me to continue honing my talent.
All right. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Next, we're going to hear from Kevin J.
I've been writing for as long as I can remember, especially poetry and really bad rap songs. My mother would always buy me little cool journals to write in and stuff like that. And I would write about my day, like John said, and I would, write random paragraphs and corny fiction. But I really started taking writing seriously when I was in the 6th or 7th grade, when my mother wrote me a copy of the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I was really in love with the book. And I was really in love with the way he spoke. Well, not spoke, well, the way he wrote and the way he was able to put his emotions on the paper, which was something that I struggled with. And my writing got more serious, and my teachers started to notice in school, and they really motivated me to keep writing. And so I did. So.
Thank you so much, Kevin. All right. Next, we are going to hear from Ruben.
I think growing up, just because, so I came to Benedict's as a junior, whereas everyone else here came as a freshman, and the teachers I had, they weren't very encouraging. I felt like I didn't really benefit from the classroom in terms of thinking that I was capable of kind of doing anything or approaching anything intellectual to begin with. So I never really thought much of it. I used to read as a kid, but when I was in school, I mean, basically until I came to Benedict, I didn't read a single book for high school. I didn't want to touch them. It was like my little protest. But during that time, I was always very introspective, and I felt like I had something to say, but I didn't have the medium to do it. And I remember the end of my junior year here at Benedict's, after also reading in Song of Solomon here at the school and really enjoying that. My father got me a copy of Richard Wright's Native Son, and I remember reading the book. And besides just the content of it, it was the notion that you can take all of these kind of ambiguous, conflicting ideas that we have kind of floating around in our consciousness and turn it into an analogy, turn it into a story that people can understand. You know what I mean? And in direct and indirect ways. And I feel that like in our this social media generation, we have really tawdry, really inefficient, really whimsical ways of expressing ourselves. Like we can post, we can text, etc. And these things are good for telling people what happened, but they don't quite cut it for telling people how we feel. Like you need to show people how you feel. And the notion that you can turn all of these things into one kind of grand analogy, one story that someone can read and actually know how you feel about the world was always really intriguing to me. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm using too much time. Like a quick example, something that comes to mind in Richard Wright's Native Son, the premise of the book, Richard Wright creates this hypothetical scenario during Jim Crow where this black man from the south side of Chicago in the segregated area murders a daughter of a white philanthropist, right? And you have these two opposite sides of the spectrum of society clashing, right? And it's like why do that? What does that show? What does that prove? And then you read it, you can kind of get your own conclusions. But then I remember I was reading Richard Wright as far as writing the book, and he said, "I have no idea, right? I just wanted to show how I felt about things." And I feel like that's the ability to kind of to kind of express the things that we can't say is what makes literature and what makes writing and what makes poetry kind of the perfect mediums. And it's something that, as I realize, getting older, its power is something I really want to practice in some way that I can.
All right. Thank you so much, Ruben. All right. And wrapping up this question, we are going to come over to David.
So I never had an interest of writing until I came to St. Benedict's. I got through my first 2 years all right. I wouldn't say I was an amazing writer, but I was good enough to get by. And then my freshman year, I was in Mr. Petrick's class, so he was the freshman English teacher. And I never knew that my writing was good. So nobody ever told me it was good. I just kind of figured by the grades I was getting back. And then I was in desperate need of a second activity credit. So I decided to join Kayrix as one of my last hopes. So when I joined Kayrix, I submitted my own work and I had to go over other people's pieces. And that's what really got me into it. And I was able to edit people's papers. People were able to edit mine. And then it improved me overall. And that's thanks to Mr. Petrick. And now I've been the Kayrix editor-in-chief for 4 years now.
All right. Thank you so much, David. Thank you all so much for your thoughtful answers on this question. I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Ross, who will ask the next question.
Okay, here it goes. Hey, guys. This is inspiring. I just want to say that first before I ask my question. So keep talking. Don't feel like you're talking too much. But here's my question. What what motivates you to write? And are there topics you're writing about right now that excite you?
Well, it's kind of weird because you say what motivates you. I never really had that in my head. I just enjoy writing. I've never needed a larger motive. It's just something I enjoy. It's the same as picking up my controllers and playing a video game for me. So if I want to do it, I'll do it. But there are bits of inspiration. Like right now, as of recently, I've started writing a little. It's a journal of a character I've created, and it's just what he's been doing day to day. And it's nothing grandiose or big or some giant adventure. It's just like a kid writing down what his day was. And it's fun. I enjoy it so much. And I mean, if that's the motivation, yeah, it's something I enjoy and I have fun with it. And yeah.
I would say my answer. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Ari. Sorry.
I would say my answer of what motivates me is very similar to Angel's, in that I don't look at writing as something as a to-do list. I would say that my main motivation would just be to look outside and observe the world around me. As Miss Laudato said, I like to write about philosophy and current day events, and that all comes from just observing not just myself, but it also can be with myself. But looking outside, and especially during these times with the coronavirus and with the way people react, that really sparks interest to me. In one of my past pieces, I wrote about it and how people have this sort of narcissism, and not by hoarding stores and banning medical care to outside countries and things of that sort. I would say just by observing other people and also by observing myself, why would I take interest in these things? And by pondering these questions, I can only be able to process these thoughts by writing. And that's why I do that.
Thanks, Ari. And Kevin?
So for news writing, I would say my main motivation to write is the deadline. And second off, it's to inform the people. Like, if in a way, it's a way to pay homage to certain events. So, like, for example, the first virtual combo, I feel like it's important to keep a public record of that. But in terms of writing for my own enjoyment, I would say that it's a way to help cope with your thoughts and emotions, but it is also a way to give another person insight into what you're thinking. And it's like almost a doorway inside a person's brain. So I would say that is my motivation to help others people know what I'm thinking and to cope with my emotions.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Jonathan, you're up.
I would say my motivation for writing is my thoughts. I think that it's so important to be able to have like a gateway where you can put your thoughts on paper and just like tell the paper how you're feeling. Because and the reason why I've reflected on this and the reason why I'm feeling this way about my motivation to write is because earlier in quarantine, I wrote a piece about, it was a fictional piece about a teenager who's basically in my position. And he goes on like an adventure where like there are like 5G towers and aliens who work with the government. And it's just a way to express what you're going through, but also while expanding your imagination and being able to go different places without actually having to go there. So I think that for me, it's just my thoughts and expressing myself is my main motivation for writing.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Excellent. Kevin J.
I think a lot of my motivation, like Kevin mentioned before, Kevin C mentioned before, was paying homage to people. It was illegal for people who look like me to read and write in this country. So I think I would be doing a disservice to people if I don't speak my truth, if I don't speak for people who can't speak for themselves. And my motivation comes solely from my heart. I don't have anything in particular that I can look at and say, oh, I'm definitely going to write about that. But it's always a feeling I get. It's always a reaction to something, whether it's pure or dark. But it's mainly, I guess, the darker topics like racism and police brutality and stuff like that, that always get me going, get me motivated, and get me angry. My motivation comes from my anger a lot. So being able to channel that anger on a paper and articulate that anger into words has always been sort of motivating for me. So
great, thanks, Kevin. Ruben, I believe we need to hear from you now.
My motivation is really kind of similar to Kevin's. I think growing up, I never felt I was able to argue, to express myself with my voice. I always felt very, very silenced. So like prior to Benedict, I attended a very prestigious, predominantly white private school in New York City, and I think at my time there, when you kind of walk in the room and you represent so many people's lives and so many people's experiences, and everyone else's reaction is to kind of challenge you with their ideas about the world, and you can't do anything about it because I mean, especially when you're not well read, you don't watch the news, when you don't know whatever, and they're telling you that your entire experience, everything you've ever seen, every person suffering essentially you've ever encountered in your life is all over exaggerating, and I think that's the main thing. Me now, I think having that experience for a big portion of my life, and kind of you traverse to this territory, and then you come back home, and it's a completely different world, and you're like, I feel like no one can hear me. I feel like no one is seeing what I'm seeing, and I feel like I have to show it because no one else seems to be saying anything. So like I guess something I'm writing right now, and I talked a lot about this with Kevin as well, as many people know about the Ahmaud Arbery situation that happened, the man who was gunned down in I believe Georgia by white citizens, and I feel like there's different ways you can look at that incident. This represents systemic racism. This represents people not valuing a black body, which is very true. But then there's also this notion of everyone in this country kind of just watch that happen and passively and not with empathy. And really didn't care and really didn't see what was going on, and we're going to let it pass. We're not going to talk about it in 2 months. And so a piece I'm working on, and I'm actually coming back for a postgrad year at Benedict, and I have the privilege of being able to write a novel as an independent study. Is I'm gonna really focus on that notion of how we seem, I don't want to say not to care, but we love to point and we love to cry, but we don't want to kind of do anything. If that makes any sense. I'm sorry. I'm just thinking.
No, you're making perfect sense. Keep going, man.
I want to say this notion of when that thing happened, we tried to post it away. There was a petition. There was a hashtag. There was a bunch of people you could email, a bunch of people you could call. But in America, in this country, the problems that people we deal with every day and that pervade our daily lives, you can't call away. You can't call away growing up with 5 friends in middle school and graduating high school with all 5 of them dead, right? There's no one to call. There's no one to get fired, right? These problems are really deep, and people seem not to recognize that. And that's something I want to try to focus on, simply because I can't find it anywhere. Toni Morrison has this really cool line where it's like, kind of make the book you want to read. Like, I want to make something that I can hold on to, that is me. You know what I'm saying? So I know I said my piece, and my feelings are real. If that makes any sense. Sorry for, I don't want to take too much time. So, yeah.
Understood. Thank you very much, Ruben. I believe we now go to Kevin. I'm sorry, David. David, you're up.
What motivates me to write, what keeps me going is definitely a deadline. I love writing, not too last minute, but I don't like to write too early, if that makes sense. But I like being pressed against the deadline. And then I also write with my feelings. So depending on how my mood is will depend how I'll write the story. But what I'm working on right now is like my next chapter, not only because I'm graduating high school, but right now, like current events. So what's happening during the pandemic and kind of like what I'm going through, what my crazy family has me doing around the house. So that's what I'm working on right now. And then I hope to continue that moving forward. And just like John said earlier, how we used to write every day, kind of like a little diary. That's still kind of true for me today, I guess. Just writing stuff down because I like to write what happens with me and what happens day to day. And then looking back on it and realizing, oh, what a good day this was, or wow, this day was really bad. But you always get through it, push through.
Thank you, David.
Well, thank you, guys. Go ahead. I kind of what I was going to ask you is to talk about your favorite writers, but I kind of want to hear more of what you have to say. But maybe we can segue. But can you tell us, please, who are your favorite writers and why? And we'll start at the beginning. We'll start with Angel.
Okay, so I have 4 favorite writers, and they each vary pretty fast. The first one was the first fantasy books I fell in love with, which were written by J.R.R. Tolkien. You know, The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. They were just great. Second was Ray Bradbury. When I got my hands on Fahrenheit 451 and saw the world he created and the deeper meanings it could have, it was great. And third is George Orwell. Same reason I like George Orwell, same reason I like Ray Bradbury, except there's a lot more. And fourth, I can't quite pronounce his name. It is a writer who wrote a book called All Quiet on the Western Front, which is a book which takes place during World War I, and it is a German soldier who is in the front lines. And it's just a different viewpoint on how everything happens. You know, you don't get to see a certain way. And all of these writers show me different viewpoints. And yeah, that's basically it.
That's just wonderful. Thank you, Angel. Ori, what about you?
With this particular question, I've actually struggled with giving a number one favorite author. I've really thought about it, and I couldn't think of one, but I have about 5 authors who vary in their beliefs that honestly just make me really think, and that's what I look for. And the first one would be Blaise Pascal. There 4 out of 5 of them are philosophers, by the way. The second one would be Christopher Hitchens. The third one would be Albert Hubbard, the American who wrote White Haitians. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not sure. The fourth one is, as Angel said, would be George Orwell. And the fifth would be, I don't know, I forgot. But they all, even though each one of them has different beliefs, what really impresses me about each of them from other people is I can read more than one book by them. Usually people like Nietzsche, I can only read one and I'll be like, okay, I'm going to be done with him for a while. Or Aristotle, or even Ernest Becker. But with those people in particular, I can read. If I can read two books by them back to back, I know they're going to be one of my favorites. And I try to replicate their writing style in particular because it's something that interests me. So if it interests me, then I would want to write like that to interest other people. And even write maybe some controversial things, because if they find it controversial, then they're going to write something back. And I think that's like the best way to create new ideas. And academic dialogue is probably the birth of great ideas. And I strive to have that and create that.
It's very heartening to hear you talk about philosophers. I love that. Kevin, C.
So quite honestly, the first author that ever got me interested in reading would be J.K. Rowling, because of Harry Potter. After watching, like the movies and stuff, and like everybody said, like, oh, the book's better. I'm like, how can anything get better than like the whole movie? And when I read the books, it was like, you don't look at any pictures, but you're immersed in this world, and just by words alone, you can imagine what the world is like. And I think that's the most interesting thing about her writing, is that you're transported into this other world, and that's the kind of writing that I like to read. I know he's not an author, but reading the Odyssey by Homer, I know he didn't write it, but he was in an order. He puts us in this world of the ancient Greeks, and it's I think it's because I like fantasy movies and all that stuff. It's like you're in this other world, but it's just there's just something different about reading out. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like they can put a whole movie in your head, and it's better than a movie. In terms of news, I would say Peter Baker, my favorite writer, because his leads are awesome, straightforward, and he's all over the New York Times. So, yeah.
That's great. Made my day, Kevin. Thank you. Jonathan, favorite writers?
All right. Some of my favorite writers, he was mentioned before, George Orwell. He wrote 1984 and Pig Farm. Those two books are just like, I read both of those books in school. I don't think I would have ever found them on my own. I'm not sure if I said the second one correctly, but I'm not sure.
Animal Farm. You got it close. Yeah.
I'm not sure that I would have found any of those on my own, but both of those books are actually like crazy because, like Kevin said, they put you in like the world and they get you really immersed into the situation. Another one of my favorite writers is Mary Campisi. She's written a series of books called A Family Affair, and it's just like really entertaining to me. I really like reading her books because they basically delve into like family problems, and it just always keeps you wondering what's going to happen next. Another writer that I really like is James McBride. He wrote my favorite book, The Color of Water. It was basically, that book is about all the struggles he and his mother went through. His mother had, I think, 12 children, and basically growing up in New York. And the reason why I love that book so much is because it doesn't hold back at all. It goes through all of his experiences in the deepest way possible. And it goes through all the experiences that his mother went through. And it just goes into every detail. And that's what I like about all of these writers. They don't hold back. Another piece of writing, this isn't a specific author, but another, I guess, blog that I really like to read is The Humans of New York. I find it on Instagram, and just when you read those anecdotes about those people, it just makes it a little bit more realer, and it makes it a little bit realer, and it makes you realize that the world around you is much broader, and there are a lot more people going through a lot more things than just yourself. So those are the things that I like to read personally.
Thank you, Jonathan. Wow. Kevin J., favorite writers?
All right. This is a hard question for me to answer personally because I don't want to discredit any of the great authors that I've read.
Kevin, your volume. Okay. Kevin, we'll come back to you because we definitely want to hear that. Ruben, can we go to you next? Come back to Kevin? You're muted too.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot to put some mute. Oh, with Kevin, is your mic working now if you want to go? We're going to try.
Hello?
Kevin, you want to try?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know what you heard, but I'll start over. This is always a hard question to answer personally because I don't want to discredit any great writers at all. But like I said before, one of my favorite books ever was the autobiography of Malcolm X. And it really gave me a perspective. It really gave me a lens to look at my world through. And that book really made me angry, but it really motivated me. Like I said before, my anger sort of motivates me. But now I think that one of my favorite authors is James Baldwin right now. I think what he does that many people don't do who write about the struggle of African Americans is he looks at the struggle in a human way. He doesn't just use Black people as a poster of victimization or a poster of them being criminals. It's what do they feel? What's the emotion? What's the feeling? And I guess the second author isn't your traditional author, but it's Kendrick Lamar. First of all, he won a Pulitzer Prize for a rap album. No, nobody's doing that. And there's something about his music that's if I'm listening to it, it's like I'm listening to a book, if that makes sense. It's like he's telling a story through his poetry, through everything that he does. His production is just everything is in sync with his message, and his message is one of unity and bringing awareness to people of these social issues. So
Glad we heard that, Kevin. Thank you. Ruben?
So I would have to say my favorite author, and I think almost I've seen him kind of as an example of how I should go about my life and the integrity I should have is Richard Wright. I read his autobiography Black Boy over the summer. And what struck me the most wasn't it as a dialogue of what it's like to be oppressed in America, what it's like to be at the bottom of the social ladder, how hard it is, look at all of these obstacles. The main kind of pervading theme of that novel is how to kind of live your life with integrity and not to kind of, I would say, bend at the winds of all the social forces around you. And that was and also the notion of how he was self-educated and how he would steal library cards, right? And he would read, and kind of the power in his voice that he gained from that. And that's kind of what really started me on my journey through literature. That's I say that I never read a single book, and I think I probably read 40 since that really I guess similar work. And then I think besides Richard Wright, it would definitely be James Baldwin for the same reason, this notion of and what the two authors have in common is they focus on this idea that kind of the common human experience is to suffer, and it's something that we should use to unite us, kind of regardless of the colors of our skin, or like a lot of the racial problems and inequality problems we have in the country is kind of our inability to recognize one another, and not seeing each other as kind of kinfolk, but almost kind of the things we hate about ourselves. If that makes any sense. I don't want to talk too long. I think besides that, someone I'm reading right now is Dostoevsky, who's he's a big Russian literature giant, and he's the guy who a lot of Black authors like write involved in. They're kind of base a lot of the themes around it and build on his ideas. It's the same thing, just notion that as people, we're kind of all going through the same stuff, and it's also very important to express that and put it in a powerful knowledge. I didn't word that the way I wanted to. I think I was thinking about what Kevin said, and I kind of got a little thrown off, but that's, yeah.
Well, I think you sounded just fine, Ruben. Perfectly fine. David, would you finish up in this line of heavy hitters?
My two favorite authors are Mark Twain, and he wrote Huckleberry Finn. And I loved that book. We read it in school, but the reason I liked it so much was because of all of the different themes that the author put in one book. So you can get all these different messages out of one book, and it goes back to the fact that like he put something like in his head and like everybody that read it. And that's what really got me into reading. So that was my junior year. And then fingers crossed that Mr. Delaney isn't listening. But my all-time favorite book that we read was Paradise Lost by John Milton, I'm pretty sure. But that was my favorite just because of the way it was written. It was written in blank verse. And it was confusing. I mean, the first two books. But once you get it, then you can admire the writing and understand like what he means. It's like a whole new language, and it just makes you feel some type of way. And so John Milton is definitely my favorite writer just because of the way that he writes, and then he puts all these themes in, and when you read it, it sounds like a different language, but when you understand it, it just makes the book so much better.
Thank you, David. Wow, I'm getting emotional just listening to all your powerful thoughts. I'm so proud of all of you, and proud to know you. We're moving into the final segment, basically, of the night. So I'd like to ask my faculty colleagues if they'll give some closing thoughts before we move and give our students the last word. Ms. Lodato, would you go first, please?
Sure. So I just want to thank all of you so much. This was incredibly exciting, and I too I'm very moved by everything that you've said here tonight. I am inspired. I am so grateful to know all of you, and I can't wait to see what you all write next. I really can't. So thank you so much. I also just want to say that after the program is over, I'm going to be sending out a commemorative booklet to you and to the rest of the St. Benedict's community with some of your work in that booklet so that people can read what you have produced, some of what you've produced, and it's just our little way of honoring all of you. So again, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us tonight. I am just so grateful and so inspired by all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lodato. Mr. Ross, would you be good enough to say something?
Yes, I too am incredibly proud of you guys. Your people spend all their lives not finding their voice, not knowing what their voice is, but you as teenagers, as seniors, have very strong voices. And it makes me proud to see you guys first leave a legacy here at Benedict's that other students can take from and learn from, but then carry on that tradition forward. It's an amazing night. I love hearing you guys talk about writing, and your words matter, right? And your thoughts matter. And you're leaving a record behind, a legacy of good writing for the future generations of Benedict students. And I just want to thank you and commend you for carrying this tradition on. And the greatest of luck to you. And again, I'm just so impressed and so proud of what you guys have done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. So some of you said that you've been writing for quite a long time. Kevin J said since he was a child, and some of you came to it later. So now's the time for you to give a message to the younger generation at our school, to freshmen, UD1s, middle division guys, and and girls, and elementary school students. What advice would you give them about writing? We'll start with you, Angel, if you don't mind. Throw that question first.
It's fine. Well, first off, don't be afraid to write because you think, oh, I can't do it, or whatever your fear is. Just put your pen on a paper and just start writing, and eventually you'll come up with something. Secondly, love what you write because, that seems like right off top. But, at the end of the day, it's something you're creating. It's yours. You can show it to other people. If you're writing an essay, you can show it to your teacher, but you have to go through a first draft, second draft, and a final draft. They want to see your best work, and that's what people want to see. But you, as the writer, as the creator, needs to love every single piece. You need to love what you write, because at the end of the day, you're the only one who will truly, truly love the words because they're yours. You can claim them as something that I did. And that's basically it. Don't be afraid and love what you do.
Thank you. Ori?
Message I would give would be in the form of a motto, which would be look and write and don't be afraid. I would say that because most of my interest came actually from classes that I did not necessarily at first think they would be so interesting. And one of those classes would be Mr. Autobotto's philosophy class, which really started the drive to want to learn. And even looking at classes that I thought I would have no idea what they were like, what they would say, such as Miss Elias's "What is love?" And I looked at it and say, What is love? Like, how am I supposed to know? I'm 18 and I don't know. And I say look because, as I said earlier, look outside, look around. And how I actually discovered one of my favorite authors was actually looking through my grandmother's old books and finding a really old book by Elbert Hubbard and reading it and just so fascinated by it. So my main message would be look around, see something, and ask why it interests you. Secondly, would be don't be afraid, and don't be afraid of taking on these big challenges. If you don't get it right the first time, that's all right. That's why there's a second draft, as Angel said. And just write your heart out. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Kevin C.
Advice for writing. Get straight to the point, and keep an open mind. Initially, I didn't like writing, and it ended up being something that I'm going to be majoring in business, so obviously it's going to be something that I use. And even if you're not going into writing, I would still encourage you to do it because it'll help you think clearly. You can organize your thoughts better. You can speak professionally. So if you're writing in school, it's not only teaching you how to write, but how to think, how to speak, how to communicate with others, and how to form relationships. And yeah.
Jonathan?
What I would say is a lot of guys don't write because they think that they're not good at it. And what I would say to that is I don't think there's really anybody who's good at writing. When someone writes, they have a thought in their head and they put a pen to the paper and they express that thought through words. So what I would say is just go into your psyche and go through what you're experiencing and write that, because those are where the best stories come from. The best stories come from experiences in real life and the imagination of people who think about experiences in real life. So what I would say is also writing can be therapy. Writing is a way to express your emotions, express your feelings, express your experiences, and just release things that you keep stuck up in your head and in your heart. So just take, what I would say is, if anything, take a therapeutic approach to writing and allow it to help you that way.
Thank you, Jonathan. Kevin J., parting thoughts to the next generation?
So I don't want people who are younger than me to be watching this and thinking, oh, like these guys are better writers than us. I'll never, be able to get my voice out. We're at the same level as y'all. We need advice too. What I would say is, if you have something that you feel like you need to share it. You never know who you can change, whose life you can change, who you can impact. But advice for everyone, but especially my young men of color. I think it's important, especially nowadays, like Ruben was describing before, to be able to voice your opinions and not sound angry all the time. Voice your opinions and understand that nobody can silence you but you, especially nowadays. And I think that you can change the minds and hearts of people with your words, your experience. Your voice matters, and so does your opinion. So always remember that, and remember that, you're the maker of your own destiny. So keep that in mind. Peace and love.
Thank you, Kevin. Ruben.
So something I kind of really want to stress to people watching this is I wouldn't say, right, so we're all on this panel, we're all seniors in high school, and we, I guess, the nature of you talking about, we call ourselves writers. I would rather look at this are people who are taking something that we've all been assigned to do in our lives as students, which is to write seriously. And we're just people who think that kind of expressing yourself through stories or through essays, etc., like kind of just might be something powerful, or just might be capable of changing how we see each other. It's really, everyone here who's expressing interest in these things, it's just because they enjoy it and they see that there's something very very strong in it, and they've been shown that that their voice matters. So I think the first thing that you kind of need to recognize, especially as a freshman or a sophomore or middle schooler, is that you're very, regardless of what your grades, regardless of what your parents have told you, regardless of what your teachers have told you, you're very intelligent. If you can look at things and you can reflect and you can find meaning in them, you have something very important to say, and that's in terms of the things that you enjoy and the things that disturb you, and the things that you love. If you have a thought, your voice matters. I think that really means for your voice to matter. And there are people, and I don't want to, what Kevin was saying, to put it on this note, there are people who want essentially to silence you. There are people as people of color who don't want to know our experiences. They don't want us to be able to express ourselves eloquently, because that is the differentiating factor between as kind of Father Ed kind of says sometimes, the difference between that kid with the 1500 and the SAT and the Benedict's kid. You're gonna have to work so hard in college is because that kid knows how to use a comma, and that's really the only thing that's stopping a lot of us from really being able to kind of use our words as source, if that kind of makes any sense. And you, if you kind of feel I'm a bad writer, this is wall in front of me, this intellectual wall in front of me. All you have to do is read the smartest people in our society, the people who we read a lot of times in colleges and high schools. Like some people have been assigned, they haven't gone to college. Some of them haven't even graduated high school, but they read. You know what I mean? It's all right there. It's all free. Everything you need to kind of do this. And I would say that if let's say you read a line in a book that's moved you, or you just had a thought that you kind of noticed something going on in the world that no one is really talking about, I would say in that you're not alone. And I think the solution to that first, before putting your pen on paper, is to read everything, and you're gonna see that there are a lot of people who see the world in the way that you do. And then write, because you're gonna read, and then there'll be a point like, okay, I'm done reading, I want to say something, and it's gonna come very natural. But I think it's really important, especially as young kids, if no one in your life is telling you this, because it's not everyone necessarily values education in our households. I'm telling you that right now. You take that first step, only kind of good things can amount from it, and it can be really powerful. And you can change people's lives. You can change your own lives and put yourself in a really influential position. Because I think, I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling at this point now, but I feel like we live in a society where we don't really value thoughts anymore. If you saw them out everything, we love watching that video of a man die, but we didn't really kill anyone thought of it. You know what I mean? We took it at face value. There wasn't an intellectual approach to these issues, and many issues, right? We kind of look at them, we all know it's bad, and we accept that. And I think that's what we need right now. People who want to sit down and think, because that's where the answers are. The answer isn't in pointing. We all know that the country is burning. We all know the world is bad, but I want to know what does that mean for you, and what does that mean for me? And there's not one person that has the answers, and you watching this might have that. So I would just say, just kind of ignore the noise. Yeah. Sorry, I have to talk too much. I don't want to do that, but yeah, no, I mean everything I say.
Thank you, Ruben. And you don't talk too much. I love listening to you. David, last words.
One thing that I would tell to the future generation is something that I learned as a freshman. First, to write with your heart, and then you write with your head. So put what you believe is right onto the first one, write with your heart, and then go back and edit it, and then you can make corrections when you revise. And the second advice that I'd give to you guys would be don't be afraid to admit that you like writing. I wasn't afraid to admit that I was writing, but I never really told anybody. I guess it was like my little secret. Like my friend group didn't really know how much I enjoyed it. But I think surround yourself with those people, and you can help improve yourself.
Thank you, David. Well, I hope everybody who's listening can understand what the power of writing can be, how powerful it can be from these brilliant young men who have so much promise, and can't wait to see what they do as they keep on writing. And please keep on writing. Please keep on writing, and please keep on talking and thinking and all great things that you're doing. We are so proud of you, as I said, and I wish we had hundreds of people who could be clapping for you. This is the best we can do in this virtual society we're in right now, is just showcase you this way so everyone can see. That's right, Kevin. Look, clap for everybody. What I want to do is showcase, what we wanted was to showcase your talents and your minds. And you've given us such a treat tonight, letting us hear you and hear your thoughts. So thank you for that. I would like to thank my colleagues, Ms. Lodato, and Mr. Ross. And I would especially like to thank Mr. Lopina, who made this all possible and just worked on this tirelessly for the past couple of weeks. So we thank him so much. And I want their words to stay with you, not mine. So good night, everyone, and thank you very much for listening.